Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 5 of Verifiably Random. I'm Mark Van Leberg, CMO of the Algorand Foundation.
Hi, guys. I'm Min Wei. I lead ecosystem at Algorand.
And I'm John. I look after tech at the Algorand Foundation.
Wonderful. Well, today's going to be a very exciting episode because we're going to talk about decentralized identity. And we have two very special guests from the Algorand Foundation with us. Christine.
Hi, Christine Mohan, VP of Ecosystem Success and Community.
And Bruno.
Hi, everybody. So Bruno, Principal Architect at the Foundation, and thanks for me to being here.
Excellent. Well, this is going to be fun because this is actually a very meaty, but also very, very complicated topic. And so maybe we should start with you, Christine. Tell us a little bit more about decentralized identity. I get always very confused because there's so many terms being thrown around. There's identity, there's identifiers, there's credentials, verifiable credentials, and this whole thing, I don't really quite understand how all these pieces fit together. So maybe you can spend a little bit of time kind of clarifying what these terms mean and how they all kind of fit together.
Sure. So yes, we can think about it as in 3 phases: identity, and then, with the advent of social media, online, you've got digital identity, and now with things like blockchain and open source, you've got decentralized identity. And what people often confuse is that they think that ID in their pocket is their identity, right? They think when I ask for something, who are you? You take out your license, you take out your passport. But actually, identity is made up of 2 things. It is made up of identifiers, which are things that are inherent to you. So your fingerprints, your face. And then it's made up of credentials, which are those things that are issued by a trusted entity, government. So that could be a passport, your driver's license, a diploma. And so when you start to break down those pieces, then you get into what could be a decentralized identity, which would have these DIDs, which is where it gets a little confusing, right? A DID is a decentralized identifier or a digital fingerprint. And then when you add the DID and a verifiable credential, which is like a digital certificate, those are the pieces that start to form your decentralized identity. And that's where you have a self-sovereign control over your own data. Did that make it more confusing or more clear?
I feel like we need to have a list down of all these terminologies so we can go back to it. But this self-sovereign identity is, I think, where it all starts, right? That's kind of the whole genesis of decentralized identity, because you can own it yourself. Is that the right way to think of it?
Right. So you would potentially have a digital wallet where you keep these verifiable credentials in there. And what makes that different is you have the control of when you want to share them and how. I can decide I only want to share my age or my zip code or my household income with someone who wants to verify this. Say a bank wants to know what your household income is. Maybe you don't want to share all of that information. You want to show part of it. So when you look back at, unfortunately, paper credentials were actually more decentralized. You had them in your pocket. You had your passport in your drawer, right? And as time has evolved, it's become, unfortunately, more centralized. Your data, your digital identity is managed by these monopolies online, and you can't grab that data back. It's very difficult to even change it. You can't revoke it. So when you think about it, I could take out my wallet. I could bouncer the fact that I could go into this bar, but I didn't have to show them my address or my name. I could keep some of that privacy. And so the real promise, I think, of blockchain and decentralized identity is it restores that control to the individual. It's complicated. We've gotten really used to the convenience of digital identity online and giving away a lot of our information, but to use these new tech to grab it back.
So that's very interesting. So, and I'm learning here today as well, because it's not an area I've spent a lot of time working in, but of course I know it's valuable because it's, for me, the idea that I can have an identity that is decentralized is one of those core pillars of the value of blockchain, I feel. But listening to you, it's interesting. So it's a decentralized identity is the composition of both a decentralized identifier and verifiable credentials that are tied to that identifier, if I got that right. And just to make it so that makes a lot of sense. And of course, the verifiable credentials, I think, are, like you say, an attestation. It's the, hey, I have a PhD. Hey, I am employed. Hey, I make over $10,000 a year or whatever. But what about the identifier? Is that like the digital or decentralized equivalent of your name? You said it was like a fingerprint, but is it like, in a decentralized context, would you have more than one decentralized identifier? And might that be, as you say, a digital version of your fingerprint or your eye or your iris or your age or name or PPS number? Or sorry, it's an Irish thing, but like social security number or whatever?
Right. Or your digital signature that you could sign with your DID. But I'll let Bruno take some of this too.
Yeah, I can take a stab at it. So we can think of it as global identifiers. So these identifiers, if we all follow, so there's big groups defining how these are meant to be spec'd. And what this brings is that it brings us to span these identifiers across the digital world. So it's a representation that is not specific to one specific ecosystem or one specific technology. You can choose to anchor your identity, whatever tech or whatever you feel more comfortable. In this case, we obviously want to do this in Algorand, and we can get there what offerings we have to enable this. But blockchains are not a hard requirement for these identifiers, but they add some nice properties. But once you have them, let's say you create multiple identifiers of these DIDs anchored in Algorand, they will be understood by any party that is part of this broader ecosystem that deals with DIDs and verifiable credentials. They will understand how to interpret them and the credentials issue on top of them. So it will give us the interoperability that a lot of times we need. I want to have my identity issued in Algorand, but I want to be able to present a credential issued against it to somebody that knows nothing of Algorand. And in those identifiers, the good thing about our technology and this decentralized aspect of it is that we control the keys that proves ownership of these identifiers. And yes, we can have multiple of them. Some of them we can publish them or not. They can be private, can be public. And it is kind of it can get a bit technical, but basically you can think of the same way we protect the keys for the way our funds and the way we make transactions, we can also protect the keys that anchor a lot of our identity.
So Bruno, what's the difference between like a DID, a decentralized identifier, and just a regular account, blockchain account that is protected by public and private keys? Is it something that's built on top of that structure, or how is that different?
Yes. So in Algorand, accounts are basically a representation of public keys. That's sort of, we have a key pairs, we keep our private key, we sign our transactions, and our addresses or accounts, the way you want to refer it, are just an encoded representation of a public key. Now, that alone is not a good identifier for many reasons. For example, I can actually have multiple addresses and multiple accounts. I will need to prove ownership of all of them individually, and carrying them out to an interoperable digital world where people can make attestations against them. It wouldn't be an easy thing to do. Everybody will have to follow the same standard, the same crypto schemes, understand the same cryptography. It is not an easily translatable standard as identity. I don't think addresses and accounts on their own are good identifiers. These dates, if we follow the spec, which in one case we do, it gives us that ability to say, this is my identity, and then you have more metadata attached to it. We can get technical where that's stored and how it works. But you can have identity keys that then you can prove what ledger accounts you want. We can totally do that. And on top of that, there is an element where you can get in cryptography terms, you should not reuse the same keys for one context to the other. There are some cases where you want to use keys for different purposes. So reusing your Algorand accounts for other contexts is questionable in some cases. So if you have identity keys, that keeps things a little bit more clean, and from multiple keys you can prove what Algorand accounts you want.
It's really cool. And so here's my last question on the terminology, because I've heard self-sovereign identity. Now I understand there's identifiers, which are your fingerprint, right? To them, you're attached credentials. These are attestations, from various entities. It's interesting to me. It feels like, as you said, you don't need a blockchain as a hard requirement to do decentralized identity, because I think maybe in a way, things like GPG from years ago, where you'd have like key pairs, they wouldn't be on a blockchain, they'd just be a cryptographic key pair. They might be signed by other people. I could sign yours, Christine, to attest to the fact that I know you. And we're kind of building a network of identity there. But of course, there's no blockchain. When you bring a blockchain into it, is that what adds the self-sovereign piece? Because you're the one in control, because you're the one who only holds those keys? Is that the idea, or something different?
Yeah, there's a lot to it. So you can still hold your own keys in not using a blockchain, and claim that it's within your control. But in the context of DIDs, some extra data needs to be attached to your identifier, because as you move this data across and people issue credentials, they need to check, for example, they need a way to find that you actually control that DID, that you actually own the keys of that DID. They need to find metadata. There can be multiple fields in this metadata. It's actually a JSON document that defines how can I find you, who controls this document, what keys are relatable to you, and this metadata needs to be stored somewhere. Now, in most DIDs, a blockchain is actually not used, so it can actually be a regular database. IPFS is used a lot in a lot of DIDs because there's multiple ways of building a DID. This is called the DID method. They can have different namespaces, which usually is attached to a specific technology. So IPFS is used a lot. Now, a blockchain gives some extra properties to the system. So, for example, you can track if a DID is beyond the database on control of some entity, you can actually not see how your data is being updated directly or who's in control. If somebody deletes your DID, you lose your identity. On IPFS, somebody has to pay for a pinning service. If you introduce a blockchain, I can actually deploy my own, let's say you deploy your own contract. You actually store and record your own identity, which is a bit different than in some models where not everybody wants to run their own IPFS node and pinning service. And there's some economic incentives for that as well.
Mm-hmm. And that piece of storing the data, that does make people a little nervous sometimes when they hear, oh, well, how is this different from Google storing my data or, Amazon or AWS? But the difference here is that it's a hash of your data, of your personally identifiable information that's stored on chain. It's not the full information of your credential. So you could have a certificate saying that you've, qualified for a mortgage, and you share that with multiple banks in this reusable KYC concept that Bruno mentioned. But that full connection of all of that data, all of your income, your address, your social security number, that is not stored fully on chain.
That is such an important point, right? That it's not stored on chain. It's just it's the hashed data. And in fact, as you guys have been talking about, these different ways in which these DIDs are used, it makes me realize, of course, that there are multiple parties involved in order for these types of solutions to be used. Can you guys talk a little bit about, the person who issues this identifier to you, the person, for that to be accepted, somebody else has to be able to see this and to verify, and then to say, yes, that's right, I trust it. Can you guys talk a little bit about the different players in this sort of ecosystem as I see it?
Sure, the different roles. There's three roles.
Yeah.
There's three roles basically, and that's what makes decentralized identity a bit complicated, because you really need all three pieces, all three legs of the stool for it to work, and for it to be interoperable. So basically, you have an issuer. That's the trusted entity. That could be the government. It could be the university. They create and they can send the VC, the verifiable credential, and then you've got the holder, right? The user. They send that credential to the users, to their wallet. And then the holder, me or you can present your VC and your DID to the verifier. So you actually want to show it to them so they can validate you are who you are, or the document is valid. And so you're sending kind of a presentation of that. And then, so that's kind of the flow. And what you need is actually, this is where standards are really important. That if you have different issuers or different folks who are not using the DID standard that's recognized by the W3C, it really isn't going to scale. You'd have to recreate this each time with each bank or each, social service system type of thing.
Maybe we can dig a little bit deeper into the standards work. And Bruno, I know you've done a lot of work on standards and figuring out how that links to what we do at Algorand. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So we're trying very hard to have offerings in technical implementations that comply with certain standards to give us interoperability and connection points with other ecosystems and the rest of the digital world. So identity is one of them. And the standards basically follow. We could have choose to have our own identity standard, and we do in some cases, and ignore what the rest of the digital world is following. The danger there that if we do want to build real world solutions, those will likely be the standards being adopted. And this is what big working groups are sort of defining at the moment. The W3C group is one of them. And these are the standards that are being paid close attention to other working groups, such as the Algorand Foundation that we are a part of. And sort of we try to have an offering in some cases in terms of technical standards that comply with these, so that Algorand users are not blocked when interacting with other players from other ecosystems or the rest of other digital players. So, for example, if I want a credential issued to me, I hope my identity in Algorand is compliant with the specs. So, because I still want to be part of this future world where I want to get issued credentials and I want to present them, but I still want the anchor of my identity taking advantage of Algorand. And this is one of the reasons why we did some work in trying to have an offering in terms of the identifier to be anchored in Algorand. So we have this thing called DID Algo we've been working on, which basically allows anybody in Algorand to create a new key pair for your identity when wallets support this, but basically allows you to create a DID. It's called DID Algo. And then you have you specify where that data is anchored on chain through an app ID, specifies a public key so that people can verify your signatures. These can be documents and credentials and other sort of thing. And we have an offering. And the metadata related to your identifier is stored in boxes. And we support any size. And basically, any credential issued on this, when those credentials get verified, Algorand will be used implicitly. So it will be read every time somebody verifies a credential that was issued against a DID Algo identifier. And this is one of the things that for me excites me, because we can write anything on chain, but we can write a lot of meaningless data. But if that data is valuable, it's going to be read a lot more times than it's going to be written. And nothing is more valuable than your identity. So every time a credential that you present, the credential is going to be issued to you, Algorand is going to be used implicitly, and the chain is going to be read a lot. It might not be transactions. Sometimes we track how many transactions we care. I actually care more about valuable data being written and very few things can be more valid than your identity. So I'm excited to have this as an offering. People working on identity can use that algo or not. The standard gives interoperability, but if they do want their identity anchor in Algorand, this is an option. I hope more people write their own, but this is one way that we can.
And is the idea, Bruno, that ultimately as a user, I will be able to create my own DID? Is it inside a wallet, or will there be dedicated identity apps that people use to create their decentralized identifier? Or like how does this become a real thing that users can do?
Yeah, so the identity space is there's a bit of a gold rush type thing to the identity wallets. There's a lot of people building wallets dedicated to identity and holding and presenting credentials. Microsoft Authenticator already supports verifiable credentials and did, so they're ahead of the curve. But it is coming. So at the moment, our wallets, the ones that we know, are not identity aware. So it's not the case that we can create DIDs in Algorand wallets. But we have a way of showing how that could be done. We need some technical things to happen. But I do see some players in the ecosystem that might need this for interoperability reasons, to prove KYC status, to prove certain status in the ecosystem, might need this. So there might be some wallets that appear or add functionality for you to create your own DIDs. And this, I think this is coming eventually.
I mean, the KYC thing I think is interesting too. Like I remember the first time I had to go through this KYC process. It's like, oh my goodness, like what a horrible process that is. Like, if we could use the ID, for instance, to make sure I only have to do this once ever in my life, and then anybody else can tap into that and like reuse that, so I don't have to go through this painful onboarding again. I think that's a good use case, right?
And also for the KYC, the entity, the accounting firm, the financial, the bank, they don't want to hold your information either. The same thing with GDPR, right? The media companies do not want to hold and have your information in databases, and they need to collect back. I mean, as Bruno said, this is big business. It's a gold rush. I think if you look at the stats, it's about 30 billion for the digital identity market in 2023, and they're predicting about 100 billion in 2030. I mean, it was growing rapidly, 5 billion per year, and then between now and the next 10 years or so. So more and more people are trying to get on this train. And when you think about KYC, compliance, DEXs, there's so many applications, and then we haven't talked about them yet. But then there's a whole, global impact and the kind of unbanked and those without any type of identity or proof of an identity.
I was just going to say, it sounds like then Algorand can be used as a platform to implement an instance of a decentralized identity, where that's comprised of my identifier and my associated credentials. And indeed, it maybe lives for the technical folks watching in box storage, and I would issue it there in some kind of JSON structure that gets mutated or whatever as VCs are added to it. Okay, that sounds good. And then, of course, as you say, just like NFTs, Pera, for example, has a very pretty interface for looking at NFTs. Right? You can, in a 3D thing, you can swirl them around. That was added, so Pera had to do the work to do that integration. So later, Pera might, or other wallets might, add another tab, right, where it's all about you and your identity. Would that be fair to say?
Yes. Not to commit the Para team to building this, but of course we're super excited about this, and I will say, I mean, this is not really leaking alpha or anything, but Bruno's been leading the team, ATAC, which is like a sort of the council, and also he's been working with the team as well. We're laying some foundational work in order to support what we are talking about here, right? The idea that you can have multiple identifiers, I think is a big fundamental shift for our ecosystem that we're kind of putting the work into, such that we can support this in the future. So absolutely, I think having this wallet identifier, sort of identity wallets, as you guys say, is really critical for us to really support this. But I think, Bruno, you mentioned we have did.algo, or sorry, did::algo, right? Is that the right terminology? We do have this. And this might be a good time to talk a little bit about, projects that can build on this did::algo. And is that an identifier? Is that a namespace? How should I call that?
Yeah, it's an identifier. Depends how you see it, but it's an identifier. And the algo bit is called the did method, which is what
did method.
Yeah.
Okay.
There is a piece of it for issuers and verifiers. They'll understand. This is a did. What's the namespace? But they won't know how to translate this into the underlying text. So there's other pieces that use that information to know. I need to look for a metadata in algo, in Algorand or Bitcoin, Ethereum.
It doesn't roll off the tongue.
It just doesn't quite roll off. I'm like, doesn't quite roll off. I'm like, what am I saying?
Right.
I think we need to do a marketing brainstorm on this to come up with something that rolls off the tongue.
It's like your address, so you're never really going to pay attention to the whole thing. The consumer won't. Don't worry.
Exactly what Christine said. So this is technical standards that the end user will not care if it's did NFT or did algo, or they want their identity there, and every time they present information like credentials, they just want it to work. They don't care about the tech. These are technical standards that's going to be used implicitly. The user won't be aware.
And you also can attach your name to a did algo. There are ways like name services you can do it and to customize it and personalize it, which is also really good when you're using it like cross-chain, cross-gaming. Then you're adding some kind of reputation and veracity to that identity. Yeah.
So we're moving into real-world applications here now, right? You mentioned gaming. I think there's a couple of projects in our own ecosystem that start using did, right? I think Care Wallet is one of them. What is Care Wallet about?
So Care Wallet is a project we're working on with St. Vincent de Paul is a U.S. aid organization. And so they partnered with Algorand and Aid Tech to build Care Wallet. And so one of the examples they used was tornado survivors. So basically, you've lost quite a bit of your identity, your belongings. And so they've been able to make it possible for these survivors to validate their identity, to receive funding and aid and finances digitally, and also to kind of use that money to redeem, things that get them back on their feet, even things like, Amazon gift cards. But all of this is traceable on chain, and that's critical for disaster relief organizations, Red Cross, all of these there's a lot of fraud anytime, you've got these people chasing storms, so to speak, and disasters. And so the ability to validate that you were in a certain zip code, you were affected by this tornado, you go and work with the care worker, the aid or caseworker. And then you also don't have to keep proving at each place you go to get your assistance. You would be able to, again, like this reusable KYC. So that helps you because you and your family are under incredible stress, right? At this moment, you do not want to fill out forms in paper. And that's a whole other, privacy issue right there. Where does that paper go? And then for the aid organization, it absolutely speeds delivery of these services at times that are in crisis. So again, and these are all traceable on chain, and people can go back and see who claimed it when. And so it's really helping defeat fraud as well.
And this is using this did method, right?
Yes.
Am I using that correctly? Is this using this did method? Did algo method?
They would be attaching the credentials to their identity. Yeah. Yes. So
again, I want to bring it back to this terminology.
They might get a credential that they have 3 children. They might get a credential that they have an elderly parent, right? They would get these different things to, again, you're attaching your credentials to your DID to create a full decentralized identity. And again, you could remove some of these things. I mean, with gaming, you might want to present in a certain way. You might have certain assets that you want to share and sell. and this other identity. And also it comes into reputation. I mean, reputation and identity are two different things, but you can build a brand around your DID and in points. And again, you can beat fraud, right? You can actually say, I've leveled up in these games, and you can have it on chain. And so you can't, what do they call it? I forget, when you just jump different levels in gaming. It's a cartooning term. I forget. But anyway, I'm not a gamer, clearly.
Yeah, I'm starting to see why a lot more like a blockchain is sensible as a platform on which to issue one of these things. I think it's because the data becomes globally available and redundantly stored, right? Because there's more than one copy of the ledger. It's globally distributed. The ledger is kept in many, many places. As you say, Christine, earlier, only commitments are stored. Only cryptographic hashes or fingerprints of the attestations are stored, not the personal data itself. On top of that, you have, on top of that global availability, you also don't have to rely on things like IPFS because, yes, they're federated or decentralized, but as Bruno said earlier, that there's no permanence there. And so IPFS, sure, it's immutable, but it's not permanent. And if you don't pay for pinning, you lose that data potentially, right? Because if not enough nodes hosted, it just disappears like a BitTorrent that just has not enough seeders, right?
And it's not so easy to use, really, for the consumers.
Right. Yeah. And of course, you got to choose your blockchain carefully. You can't have one that's up and down like a yo-yo, because then you're in a disaster situation. You're trying to get your aid, and I don't know, you're trying to redeem your thing, and it doesn't work. So you need a reliable blockchain, but blockchain nonetheless.
Yeah, there's another property that here I just want to flag. So a lot of identity providers expect users to connect their wallet to whatever process they want, might be KYC or not, and then issue a DID based on some public key provided by the wallet to this user, and they have to maintain all the pinnings from IPFS or databases for as many users as they want. Now, in DID algo, it's a clear design choice, is that we store things that we need in boxes. So for any identity provider, if they were to migrate to DID algo, instead of having a recurring cost, they will have a fixed cost, but it's actually, if the user actually disappears or wants their data erased, they will actually claim that money back, because you lock algos away for space in boxes. But if you actually take that out, so there is an economic incentive for doing this. And second design choice is that I don't have to rely on identity providers to write and update this data. I can deploy this contract myself. So, which is another benefit that's in some DID methods that's not the case that we have today. So,
so Bruno, not everybody may know what boxes are. Can you tell us what boxes are?
Yeah. So anytime you have an application, there is you can allocate these segments of data to store information. And in Algorand, this can be seen as sort of dynamically sized data. You lock algos away for as much space as you need. Each box has a certain size, a fixed size. And as you lock more algos, you can get more access to these boxes. And as you if you want to remove data, part of this application, you can get those algos back. So in DID algo, we have this metadata. It's not user information, it's metadata used for cryptography bits. We use boxes to store this. And if things get really big, we allocate more boxes. We split this thing into as many boxes as we need. And then as part of the software that knows how to get this metadata, it knows how to append the chunks of data in each box and reconstruct the whole thing. And so this is why we can offer this to identity providers, where you can lock things away, you have a fixed cost, but you can recover it. But if I want to fully be in control of everything, I can deploy my own contract. I manage my own metadata on chain, and it's a bit different than a lot of big methods out there, where you rely on somebody to keep this data alive for as long as you want to use your DID. So I think here we have some advantages here. So I hope people use it or create their own. But
and for those of you who don't have a PhD in computing, It's store your files on Algorand, yo.
I like that.
Yeah, not shoe boxes. We decided to call it boxes because someone thought it was a cute thing. You got the ones and zeros. You want to put them in a box. The box. We let you store the data in little chunks, as Bruno said. So, but there's no real boxes, of course. But the nice thing is it lets you store any data. You can store a picture of a cat. You can store an MP3. You can store the text of Harry Potter. And when you're finished, when you don't want that data anymore, you can nuke it. You can delete it, right? And so that's the benefit. And the cost, because Algorand is so cheap to use generally. The cost of uploading that data to the Algorand chain for permanent, reliable, robust storage is essentially, really, really low.
Makes me wonder why NFTs still use IPFS, but that's another conversation.
And we should talk about kind of NFTs and credentials and that linkage, because they're a really good, easy use case, right? So we have two projects within Algorand that are doing variations of this. So we've got non-fungible domains, or NFTs, and as we talked about before, it's like a naming service, right, that you can attach certain of your profiles to. So you could choose that I have my NFT, I want to link some metadata to it, so I could decide that I want my Discord and my Telegram on this one, and that would be one identity. And then maybe I want my Twitter, maybe my Facebook, if I still use Facebook, or Meta. And you can actually decide which metadata, pick and choose, and be really customized about that. And you can also change it, and you can also pull them off. And then by the ability to verify these fields. And you can also attach them to Algorand addresses. So again, you're creating a really portable identity, and that you can decide where and when to use it. And then we also have Go Plausible. So they are working within, compliant. They're following the spec around their DIDs, and they are also working with one of our other platforms, Gora, which is a next-gen Oracle service on Algorand, so that every DID and VC, or verifiable credential or certificate that's issued via Go Plausible and claimed, that is actually verifiable on the Gora platform. So when you go through the process, you'll even see at the bottom, verified by Gora. And then you can take this very nicely designed certificate, and then you can add it to your LinkedIn profile and say that I have finished this boot camp. We're using it actually across all of our global boot camps. We've used it for Korea. We used it for Nigeria. And then this, as a builder, as a developer, as you're going through, you can show that you proof of completion, proof of attendance. So to me, certificates and verifiable credentials are kind of like the on-ramp to decentralized identity. People understand these concepts, and they really want to build their reputation, build their professional credentials, and a platform like Go Plausible makes it really easy to do that.
So how far away are we from like governments starting to issue credentials like passports and stuff like that? You can see when you walk into the US right now, you have like something called a digital passport, but that's of course not the same thing, I guess. So how far away are we from having government be an issuer of like a credential like this?
India is already there, like 1,000%. They have a program called Aadhaar, where every single person who is a resident or a citizen of India has a national number, a number that goes across all types of social services. Is it decentralized? No. But again, this is that push-pull. These you make a little bit of you have to give a little. What's amazing when I hear about a system like that, and if you come from an identity background and you want it to be pure, and you don't want any central registry holding all of my personal data. However, in some countries, the ability for someone who did not have an identity, who did not have their birth certificate, who doesn't have access to or the means to have a passport, nor do they have anywhere to store it, the ability to have this number and have this identity, national identity, means that they can qualify for social services. They could register for voting, education, school, and healthcare services. So it is one of these things where I think just like decentralization in general is a journey, decentralized identity is a long journey, and you have to kind of have some give and take along that journey to decide what that use case is and that untable need and that end state user, what's the most beneficial to them. And I think over time, yes, maybe these governments will give back a little bit and make these things perhaps like revocable. But for now, I think the ends justifies the means on that one.
It's interesting. I think it's funny as well. There's a kind of an irony to me that we're like, please government, please issue me your centralized attestation to my decentralized platform.
Well, Bruno, we were talking about this earlier, right? I mean, the IDIS wallet and the EU approach here has got a lot of identity folks not so happy and consumers freaked out, frankly. There's going to be a lot of we're going back to the Facebooks and Googles of the world, right? A lot of information is going to be stored on very centralized databases, which is fine if you trust your government. But say that government is a different government in a year, and all of that information is stored on this government database or on multiple databases.
And maybe as well in places where, in more extreme places where they have like social credit type things or in parts of Asia or whatever, it becomes even more extreme, right? And I think in those places it's even more important, maybe. Yeah.
Can you guys, for those that aren't familiar with what's happening in Europe, can you guys give a little bit of a high level for what's going on and why this is becoming a big topic?
Yeah, so in the next coming years, so the EU has come up with this set of standards. It's been talked about for a long time. It's been finalized recently, and defines how EU citizens, part of the member states, will have these wallets in your phone that still can be issued verifiable credentials, but basically your national ID card, your passport, your driver's license, everything will be digitized and put in these wallets, and they abide by their own standards. And you don't get issued a decentralized identifier. You get issued a PID, personal identifier, is issued by a member state, and all the credentials and information is issued. It's device bound. We'll get a bit technical, but as part of the design is they need to know which device you actually own. So you have to go, let's say you go to your driver's license school and they issue a credential, and cryptographically is linked to that device or your national ID card. So they know which devices you own. This is possible because each device has a little hardware component that keeps these keys very locked away, and they issue specifically for that. And it is a different standard than most that these of decentralized identity and the rest of the decentralized world. But if we want to build real world applications, and some players might want to be fully compliant in certain jurisdictions, and they might have to pay attention to those standards and those rules. So there might be users that decide to be onboarded into this system, or wallets might decide to support it as well because they might want to use compliant payments within the EU or something. And it's something to pay attention, because if you really are the enterprise for business chain in certain jurisdictions, we might have to pay attention to those. Nothing is prescriptive, but I imagine there are some products that want to operate in certain jurisdictions might need their users to use a PID instead of a DID. That type of thing.
And it could potentially open like cross-border trade, cross-border travel, right? Your PID will go across through your, as you're traveling through EU. So there's some benefits there and efficiencies.
Yeah. But I guess I'm coming back to Mark's question around like, what's it going to take for, a broader adoption? And if the EU is going to come in and the member states are going to be able to issue their own PIDs that are not interoperable with the, what a lot of the Web 2 and Web 3 sort of organizations really want to adopt in terms of the DIDs, that's going to I don't know, it feels like one step more complex complex than what we had previously, right? So I guess that just goes to the complexity and the challenge in something like this, where everybody agrees that digital identity makes sense. Everybody agrees that being able to issue verified credentials makes sense. Everybody agrees that we need all these different parties to kind of partake. And yet, like, one move could potentially disrupt that balance. I just think it's kind of an interesting, it's how delicate it is. You know what I mean? So.
And it took a long time, right? I was on these working committee groups in European, blockchain association and talking to all the lawmakers and decision makers and regulatory bodies. And this was a 2, 3, 4 year process. And a lot of folks weren't really happy where it ended up, but it is further along than it was. And there was certainly a lot of thorough discussion around DIDs and self-custody wallets and all of these things. Yeah, it's really complicated.
Well, I'm actually very happy, Christine and Bruno, that we've been able to kind of hack your brains for the last 45 minutes or so. I've learned so much about digital identity and decentralized, anything decentralized. So I think it's very cool. And I think our viewers and listeners will have learned a lot as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm glad as well. Just one last thing, that the team who've worked on the did algo method have set us up to be part of this, because, as you said, Christine, it's explosive in growth by the stats that you shared earlier on, and I'm really glad that Algorand is positioned certainly to capture a part of that market and a part of that growth, because I think it's an important segment.
I think it's time to bring in Fred now.
Yay!
Fred,
hey everyone. Hey Mark.
How are you today? How are you today?
I'm gonna put on my fancy scarf. I need to upgrade.
I know. I forgot to put on something decent as well. So, Fred, you're always leading on that front, huh?
I'll take it for the team. Thank you so much for the intro, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me again. I'm thrilled to be back, to share with the community a lot of updates from our ecosystem that happened in the last few weeks. Before I get started, though, I just want to give a very friendly disclaimer that I apologize in advance, but it seems that my internet connection is a little bit unstable today. Unfortunately, Brazilian infrastructure is not as good as, and reliable as Algorand stack, but I'll give my best and we go from there. Okay? So let's just jump right in. I'm going to start with an update, the same way that I started last time, talking about XGovs. So the XGov voting session 4 has just ended. 94.3% of the total stake voted, approving and funding 20 proposals. Out of these 20 proposals, 9 of them are for retroactive funding, basically funding projects that have already built and delivered products. And then 11 proposals were approved for proactive funding, meaning these projects are now going to develop and launch their products in the upcoming months. For a full list of projects that were approved in voting session number 4, just check out the XGov portal at xgov.algorand.foundation. All right, let's jump into DeFi today. So Folks Finance just concluded the second round of the community coin contest, and the winning tokens will have incentivized liquidity pools at Tinyman and Pact for the next several weeks. So the DGens are pretty happy about this. Messina One also announced the Token Wars, a cross-chain DeFi contest. All information in their channels, go check it out. C3 has announced an upcoming integration with XLayer, a zero-knowledge rollup that connects OKX to Ethereum. And Compax launched limit order functionality in their order router. This will make all the DGens out there very happy. And, still talking about Compax, they just released their notes about the proposed XUSD dynamic interest for their own stablecoin. So go check it out in their forum as well. But okay, let's move on. Next vertical we're talking about today is RWAs, real world assets. A-Note Music paid out royalties from several of their tokenized music catalogs in the last couple of weeks. Coinbanks received the ISO 27001 certification, basically reinforcing their expertise in cybersecurity and data protection. And Coinbanks also just released a new product called the Last Mile, which is basically an end-to-end suite of solutions for companies that want to bring blockchain technology to their payment solutions. So they basically cover all the way from invoicing and billing to processing payments, everything on blockchain rails, of course, leveraging Algorand. Lofty AI tokenized several more properties, even including a horse ranch in California. They also launched a bunch of new liquidity pools against some of the properties they already have listed on the platform. And they also just released a very good UI update that just brings better visibility into the analytics for the order book section in the website, so you can better understand the market dynamics for each property. DeFi Yama now started tracking Vesta equity in the real world asset section, and they have started off with over $19 million in TVL, and of course that's being counted towards Algorand's general TVL. And at last in DeFi, but certainly not least, we have Meldgold. They just released an update to their 2024 roadmap that includes, a lot more transparency around their proof of reserves, centralized exchange listings, additional liquidity, and a lot more. So go check it out. But let's now switch gears a little bit now and talk about NFTs and gaming. A lot of stuff happening there as well. So AlgoX NFT just released an update to their inscriptions minting tool. So all of you, NFT crazy heads that love inscriptions, now it is a lot faster, cheaper, and easier to mint your inscriptions in Algorand. Agent Y NFTs released another game in their Play to Earn arcade. It looks very fun, and they also just released a refreshed website. Everything looks pretty cool. Kudos to you guys. Looks very nice. Realms kicked off the sales of the land in their virtual world, and they also just launched a YouTube channel. They have been making lots of waves within our community and also cross-chain community by all these cross-chain partnerships that have been landing with NFT collections, big NFT collections, across the Web3 space. So kudos to these guys as well. ExoMarket V2 is almost here. They keep teasing. I cannot wait to see how it looks like. So, Ted and team, hurry up because, you're creating a lot of FOMO in all of us, right? We just want to see how this looks. And, to wrap up NFTs and gaming today, Azalytic just released advanced analytics with more and better aggregated data from NFT collections in our ecosystem. Now, moving on to the last vertical I think that I want to talk about today, which is basically infrastructure and access. Algorand was just listed at token.com exchange, so just one more avenue for you to interact with the Algo token. Blockstalker just released an update and is now fully integrated with NF domains for event alerts. And talking about NF domains, I just want to give a quick shout out to the team, to celebrate their second anniversary on mainnet. They just celebrated a few days ago. I see John clapping. Everybody's happy. NF Domains has an incredible team, but even better product, right? These guys are fantastic. So just congratulations to you and keep building because you have the best name service in the industry by far. So just keep building on it. All right. ParaWallet expanded its API and now offers, public endpoints for retrieving asset lists and more enhanced details from all the assets. And now, you can also use USDC and USDT on Algorand, to book your travels all over the world through Travala.com. So, go on your travels, use USDC or USDT on Algorand Rails. And that's basically all the ecosystem news that I wanted to share for today, but I'm not done yet. There's one more thing that I want to share. Well, sorry, two more things. One of them is governance voting. So governance voting period 11 is open. So for all of you registered governors out there, go to the governance portal, cast your vote. You have until June 15th, but don't wait until last minute. Just go and do it now, okay? And then the very last thing I want to share today before wrapping up my time here is some statistics about Algorand in the month of May 2024. So, last month, Algorand processed 94 million transactions. And to be exact, it was 94,992,355 transactions. Out of this, 256,000 new accounts were created, 930,000 new blocks were processed, and all of this led to a new TPS all-time high. We processed 5,716 transactions per second that were sustained for 100 blocks in sequence. That's almost 5 minutes of processing over 5,000 TPS without breaking a sweat, of course, without crying for help or breaking down or doing any of the funky stuff. We just worked as usual, like good tech should, right? And to contribute to this.
You forgot one thing. My personal node has now proposed 5 blocks.
Look at this guy. I'm happy.
Fred, of those 99 trillion billion transactions that we did last month, how many failed?
About 0, John. About 0. I'm just being friendly because it's actually exactly 0. But hey, just keep asking, All right. And, all of these like 94 million transactions that we processed last month, we had 5 dApps, decentralized applications that really contributed to a lot of this volume. So just going in order, number 1 was Aura Mining, which I believe is John's mom's favorite fruit, I guess. I don't know. He's clapping.
Go on, Aura.
I think that's validation. All right. Second dApp to contribute a lot to this volume was C3. the cross-chain self-custodial exchange that settles transactions on Algorand. Number 3 was World Chess, followed by TravelX and the Fry Foundation. So kudos to all of you, contributing to these massive numbers that Algorand has been doing. And of course, I just want to wrap this up by thanking my friend and colleague, Mr. Simon Bonanno, our, incredible master of the numbers and head of business intelligence here at the Algorand Foundation that pulled all the stats for me to share with the community today. So, and the very, very last thing I want to share before leaving, still on the data side, is that, our very own CMO, Mark, launched the Fix the Data campaign to involve the community to help us identify, report, and fix wrong, outdated data and information about Algorand in the web. So, Mark, as a wrap up, is there anything that you want to add about Fix the Data?
Yes, specifically, actually, a call out to all of the developers that are developing on Algorand to make sure that they report all of their public repos so that they can be tagged as an active developer on Algorand. And if you don't have a public repo, shame on you. You should create one because this is all open source. We should all be open source. So call out to all the developers. Make sure you submit your data so that you're counted as an active ecosystem member.
Fantastic.
Well, thank you, Fred. Thank you, Fred. A lot of exciting news. And on a scale of 1 to 10, how excited are you about upcoming Decipher?
Oh, like a million billion. Is that cool?
Actually, can't wait. I can't wait to meet a lot of these ecosystem projects in person there in Barcelona. That'll be a lot of fun. And also plan a trip in Barcelona using Travala and Algos.
You're paying attention. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, team.
Thanks, Fred.
Thanks, Fred.
Okay, well, I think that's all we have time for today. So thanks you all for joining, and we'll see you guys back in 2 weeks for another episode of Verifiably Random.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.